Everything that was happening resembled a painfully familiar plot, as if taken from a standard fantasy novel, which can be found on the internet. Plot twists, heroic battles, and epic events. Everything seemed predictable. One ordinary day, he woke up and realized that the reality around him had changed, and he was no longer in the world he knew. Everything around him indicated that he was in a medieval fantasy world, where magic and knightly armor were an integral part. In the heat of battle, he found himself face to face with an enemy whose movements were swift and dangerous. The blows of swords and the sound of shields shook the air, and he realized that not only his life, but also the future of everything around him depended on the outcome of this battle. Faced with the cruel reality, he had to become a mercenary, trading a quiet life for a sword and armor to survive in this ruthless world. He honed his fighting skills, trying to avoid every blow and respond to every lunge of the enemy. Each battle turned into an endless chain of fights, where life depended on the speed of his reactions and the sharpness of his blade. He again and again faced opponents, each of which was stronger and more dangerous than the previous. But there was nowhere to retreat. The blows seemed to fall from all sides, but he did not give up, continuing to fight, despite the fatigue and pain. His weapons were covered with the blood of enemies, and each round of battle caused in him a new wave of determination, because he knew that defeat is tantamount to death. Through the blood, pain, and fatigue, he continued to squeeze out the last of his strength. The enemy was ruthless. His face was twisted in a furious grimace, but fear could not stop the one who was ready to fight to the last. His opponent, huge and mighty, raised his axe above his head, preparing to deliver a crushing blow that could end the battle. At that moment, time seemed to slow down, and he gathered all his strength to repel the attack. The clang of metal rang like thunder as the blades clashed. He had to stay focused, not wasting a second of hesitation, because any moment of delay could be his last. He knew that the slightest mistake could lead to instant death, because the enemy was ruthless and would not give him a second chance. The deadly blade froze in the air, and she appeared, ready to deliver the decisive blow, and he prepared for the last dash. She was on the back of her trusty warhorse, in the heart of the battle, shouting in fury to her ally not to let his guard down for a moment, for on the battlefield, any second of inattention could cost a life. At the critical moment, when the battle had reached its climax, she turned to her warriors and ordered them to immediately signal the attack, calling for one last hope to change the outcome of the battle. One of her subordinates quickly brought a trumpet to his lips, inhaled deeply and exhaled powerfully, filling the air with an alarming sound that heralded the beginning of the decisive phase of the battle. There was a loud roar. An order sounded like a thunderous roar. All the forces were to rush to the attack, and each warrior, gathering the last of his strength, rushed at the enemy, forgetting about pain and fatigue, and defeat the enemy. The whirlwind of battle engulfed them all. Swords clashed with swords. Blood and sweat poured down without ceasing. Each new blow was not just a movement of weapons, but a desperate attempt to survive in this chaos. When the fighting subsided and the darkness finally dissipated, he was left standing alone amongst the pile of fallen bodies, still clutching his weapon tightly as if ready for another attack. The sun was slowly rising over the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of purple. Surviving this battle was a miracle. He knew that once again fate was on his side, allowing him to avoid certain death. There were too few people left on the field who could testify about this bloody day. The girl was going to meet the war. As she came closer, she looked at him, tired and exhausted, and in his eyes there was a mixture of relief and pride. "You survived again?" she asked faintly, as if emphasizing the rarity and value of this achievement, running her hand over his face with care. With a slight smile, she raised her hand to make sure that his comrade was indeed unharmed, touching his face affectionately and putting her arm around his neck to make sure that not a single scar had been added to his battle marks, that everything remained as it was. The warrior put his hand on her waist. She smiled through the bloodstains on his face and the dusty armor, and quietly remarked that it was important to her to make sure that his handsome face was unharmed in this hell. They stood drowning in the setting sunlight, aware that another day of life had been snatched from the clutches of death, and that all was well. She looked at him with a slight smile, despite the blood that covered her clothes and armor. Her voice sounded quiet but firm, as if she wanted to say something important at that moment. Somewhere outside the fortress, the rain rumbled on the roofs of the ancient houses, and every drop falling from the sky added to the dark mystery of this city. She confessed that she had always loved the rain, because it brought comfort to her troubled soul. When the war was over, they would surely go east, to where warm winds and new horizons awaited them. It was their unspoken promise to each other to survive and see this land together. He kept looking up at the sky, explaining why he had chosen the east, because it rained often there, and perhaps this wet climate reminded him of her, for she loved rain. Her words, full of hope and vulnerability, sounded in his ears like an echo of the past, and he firmly decided that he would not forget her. It was her wish. He must keep in his memory every little thing, every moment associated with her. The rain continued to fall, flooding everything around them, but their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a sharp shout from the commander. The orders sounded loudly, echoing off the stone walls, calling them to action, to battle, to a commitment that could not be ignored. Through the veil of rain came his comrades, who had long been missing. They called his rank captain, with joy and relief on their faces, as if they were seeing their captain for the first time in a long time. He looked at the soldiers and asked where the others were. He needed to make sure that everyone he had sent on the mission had returned alive and unharmed, that no one was missing in this darkness of war. The conversation turned to a man, his name was Hans, who had always seemed quiet and inconspicuous to them. But this time, he had caused a serious accident that no one could have imagined. One of the soldiers grinned, remembering how he had always disliked Hans, and how no one had imagined that he would be a magician hiding his powers until it was inevitable. He imagined facing the mysterious symbol, glowing purple in the darkness, and the realization slowly came to him that magicians could not be trusted, he said, full of bitter disappointment and hidden fear. One of the soldiers whispered that the only explanation for what had happened was a deal with a demon. He was sure that the mage had allied with dark forces to gain power, and there was no doubt about it. He stood in silence, realizing the weight of the words he had heard. Demon, the word resounded in his head, awakening old fears and vague memories that had long rested in the depths of his mind. One of his companions chuckled, dismissing all rumors of demons. He even joked that all this jealousy of Hans was only because they had lost the title of handsome to him. The words sounded light, but the reproach in them was obvious. The conversation quickly degenerated into a joking argument, where everyone tried to find out who had ever deserved the nickname of handsome. The friends laughed, but there was a slight tinge of suspicion and hidden anxiety in the air. While the mates argued, the captain just sighed and headed towards the headquarters. He knew it was important to keep a cool mind at this time, and decided to check for information that might shed some light on what was going on. They talked quietly amongst themselves as they discussed that Hans would no longer carry his old nickname. He would now face a new fate, a new name connected to what had happened, and this name would change him forever. One of the soldiers jokingly said that Hans would now be called handsome, even if only his head remained. The joke provoked laughter, but the captain's eyes reflected only weariness and doubt. The captain sighed heavily, suppressing his inner turmoil, but a slight grin appeared on his face. He knew that even in such moments, when the world was collapsing, it was important to keep the spirit and not to lose the presence of mind. He looked wistfully at the windows of the headquarters, immersed in the shadows of the rainy evening, thinking about Hans' future. If they caught him, the fate of this magician was already sealed. He would be on the hangman's rope. A strong hand reached for the solid wooden door, lingering for a moment as if its owner was trying to decide whether to enter. The decision had already been made, and he knocked, leaving no choice for himself or whoever was on the other side. The head of the castle guards was waiting for him in the room, and he looked at the captain with a restrained look at him. "Is it not too late for a visit?" Captain Aaron asked with a slight sneer, clasping his palms together, waiting for a reply. Aaron calmly explained his lateness by saying that he had fallen asleep, which was rare for a man of his position. The commander seemed to accept his words, but remained wary. The commander-in-chief, sitting at his old wooden desk, suddenly changed the topic of conversation, he decided to inquire how close Aaron's relationship with the criminal Hans was, noticing a note of hidden accusation in his voice. Captain Aaron, holding back his inner tension, looked into the eyes of his interlocutor, trying to hide his true feelings. "Is it true?" asked the commander, not allowing him to avoid answering. "To some extent, yes," came Aaron's cautious answer, trying not to give out more information than was necessary. His voice was calm, but inside him contradictions were raging. Memories of Hans filled his mind. He was a talented and intelligent boy who had shown unusual abilities at a young age that had allowed him to enter an academy that was so difficult for ordinary people to get into. Aaron, concealing the true extent of their acquaintance, lied that they only occasionally said hello when they met in the narrow streets. He realized that at the moment a confession would only complicate the situation and attract unnecessary attention. The commander nodded satisfactorily when he heard his answer, noting that it was probably for the best that the situation was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. Aaron realized that this case was no ordinary crime. Everything pointed to the fact that the Lord's daughter was involved, and now the secret hung over them like a sword of Damocles. In such a critical situation, when every mistake could cost lives, the commander slowly but confidently placed his hand on the captain's chest. His gesture spoke more than words, but he continued, "If our guards manage to catch the culprit." The commander laughed sharply, straightening up in his chair, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. "Don't you think that would please the Lord himself?" he asked, and his laughter echoed through the empty hall, while the captain remained serious and tense. The commander's voice suddenly became harsh, and he looked straight into the captain's eyes and added, "You now know what I mean?" he asked. The words seemed to hang in the air, and he finished his order. "Bring him in, dead or alive," he said again. Aaron nodded quietly, remaining calm in front of the commander, and made a discreet promise. "I will do my best," he said. He understood that this mission was now a matter of honor, and its success or failure could affect the fate of the entire fortress. As he left the office, Aaron felt a slight irritation. He was tired of the constant struggle, he thought, as he walked down the dimly lit stairs. Anger and anxiety mingled in his eyes, as he remembered that Hans had made his life hang in the balance. That damned Hans, he thought. He might lose his head himself. His thoughts flashed through his mind, but his face remained impenetrable. The fourth guard of the outer fortress, made up of the best men, stood before him, and the captain realized that the time for action had come. Everything was ready, one of them reported. The rain was getting heavier, and the gloomy alleys of the city were falling into darkness, no matter how crazy the mages were. "We must track them down," thought the captain, clutching the hilt of his sword. No mage could hide from his watchful eye. They cautiously made their way through the dirty streets of District 7, each step echoing under the squelching boots. "If Hans is really hiding in this filthy hole," the captain thought, suspecting that the answer was already in front of his eyes. Finally, one of the soldiers quietly suggested that they pretend to be looking for the criminal and go to the nearest tavern for a beer. This plan sounded tempting, but the captain knew that he had no choice. He had to finish what he had started. His expression becomes tense, and an ominous violet glow appears in his gaze. Magical energy glows in his eyes, making his gaze piercing and cold. He quietly but confidently says, "Yes, sir," realizing that he now had something significant to do. Aaron presses his lips together in frustration as he watches his companions, whom he mentally calls medieval fools, continue to joke and discuss drinking. Despite the fact that they are on a serious mission, his irritation grows as he sees how careless they are at such a critical moment. In the darkness of the night, through the rain, Aaron notices a suspicious silhouette crouching beneath his hood. The silhouette seems almost an indistinct shadow against the rain-blurred streets. He cautiously takes a few steps forward, raising an eyebrow, perplexed, his voice cutting through the noise of the rain, expressing bewilderment. Aaron, clutching tightly the hilt of his sword, turns to the hooded stranger. He called out to the stranger, "Immediately remove the hood and show your face," said our hero. He realizes that he cannot afford carelessness, because any mistake could cost him his life. The stranger, slowly and with some theatricality, raises his hand to the hood. As if enjoying the moment, on his face, you can see a sly grin, he whispers, almost with nostalgia in his voice. Ah, how long it has been since we met. As if a flash of lightning illuminates the stranger's face, and he says Aaron's name with barely concealed triumph, Aaron, who, as if struck by thunder, freezes on the spot, not believing his eyes. Too long silence and a sudden change of emotions on his face gives away that this is not an accidental meeting. A wide grin spreads on the stranger's face, his eyes sparkling with pleasure. He comes closer, his every step resembling a game with fate. With a heavy sigh, which sounds like an ominous harbinger, he says, "At last, we are here." His voice fades for a moment. The stranger, whose words had not been finished, is suddenly met by a violent blow. The stranger, whose words were never finished, receives a powerful blow to the face, from which his head is thrown back violently, bloody spatters flying to the sides, flying against the background of the continuing rain. Aaron acts instantly, as if not waiting for his opponent to finish his words. His fist, cutting through the rain, reaches its target with such force that his opponent flies backwards, water and blood mixing in rapid streams, emphasizing the brutality of the moment. Aaron gets into a fighting stance. His face is twisted with rage. He keeps his emotions in check, but the trembling in his voice betrays his inner turmoil. "You bastard," Aaron says, his eyes blazing. "It's your own fault," he continues. "Your own actions put you in this trap, didn't they?" His voice trembles with tension. A stranger sitting with a wary expression on his face says, "I don't think so." And someone from behind him asks him, "Who are you?" The stranger says, "I'm just a herbalist in this alley, and I was just about to tell you about the theft." The stranger is stunned and surprised to recognize his interlocutor and exclaims, "Now I see why you look familiar to me," he says, and his interlocutor, frightened, steps back slightly. A male stranger holding a sore spot asks indignantly, "That's not the answer I expected from you. And why you hit me without warning and made such a scene?" His face shows the pain and indignation of what is happening. Aaron, in his cloak, stands in front of him with his arms crossed over his chest, showing his majesty, and says, "Damn, what a disgusting day I've had." He continues, "All my herbs were stolen, and now I've been beaten by the guards." The man continues to reason out loud, "But seriously, why would this thief be so urgent to steal a common herb like grimroot?" He is surprised to notice that it can be found in the hills outside of town. The stranger draws an important conclusion. Why did the thief need my herb so urgently? If it was grimroot root, they are used to stop bleeding. He stares intently in front of him and asks the decisive question. But it is a simple root. It can be found in the hills. A dark and gloomy nook on a rainy night, and again a hooded stranger. He is huddled against the wall, breathing heavily. His face is hidden, and he looks like he is hiding from someone. What he is hiding is yet to be understood. He seems to be wounded, thought our hero. He is clearly agitated and hardly the man he claims to be. He is breathing heavily and whispering quietly from fatigue. He is soaked and chilled. It would seem that he has been left alone, but no. He has questions to answer. When Aaron sees the silhouette of a familiar man in front of him, he suddenly says, "Hans, is it really you?" His eyes are full of bewilderment and anxiety and hope, indicating the importance of the moment. Aaron, with his sword on his shoulder, calmly, but with a slight grin on his face, asks him what that expression is. Obviously, the situation is less tense for him than for his interlocutor, who is hiding under a hood. The stranger, feeling angry, clutches his wounded arm violently. Expressing disbelief, he mockingly points out the absurdity of a normally pedantic man taking such a drastic step of cutting off his arm, emphasizing that this shows his weakness. Aaron in armor asserts his superiority with a stern tone, holding his weapon at the ready. He confidently declares that the conflict is over and invites his opponent to make nice with him before he is forced to act more harshly. The hooded stranger stammers, gripped by fear and doubt, unable to accept the situation, his voice trembling, suggesting that his resolve is not yet broken despite the overwhelming circumstances. A sudden realization seizes him, his eyes wide with shock. Black ink swirls around him, highlighting his sudden fear and surprise as he tries to comprehend what is happening. an important moment when all his beliefs may be threatened. A wave of icy blue energy rushes towards him, unleashed by the hooded stranger, who stands without flinching. The protagonist watches in amazement and shock as the spell unfolds before him. Confused and on edge, our protagonist reacts to the unexpected display of magic. He cackles in disbelief, wondering if such immense power could be caused by heavy rain, his face expressing a mixture of concern and surprise at the unexpected turn of events. From under the hood comes a soft and sad voice. A young man with blonde hair, drenched in rain, apologizes regretfully, turning to our protagonist, saying the phrase, "I'm sorry, brother." A young man under a hood, clearly tense in a broken voice, says that he cannot afford to be caught. Around him, raging magical vortexes. Blue spell envelops the space, creating a sense of inevitability and danger. The protagonist, caught in a powerful water spell, struggles against the torrents of water that swirl around him, his body tense. He can barely stand on his feet, desperately trying to overcome the force pulling him down. The water bubbles and splashes heighten the drama of the moment, emphasizing the power of the attack. The hooded young man, who is really Hans, barely containing his emotions, shouts out loudly that this is not the end for him, his face tense and his voice full of determination. Despite all the difficulties, the streams of water still hover around him, emphasizing that his struggle is not yet over. It is clearly a magician using a powerful spell. Stretching his arms upwards, a glowing blue magic circle appears. Waves of magical power spread through the water and air, giving the impression that it is about to unleash its power on Aaron. Tension hangs in the air. The protagonist, gritting his teeth, desperately wades through the raging torrents of magical water coming from the magician's spell. His face is covered with raindrops that mix with sweat, indicating the tension he is feeling. The weather conditions make this battle even more difficult. Aaron, struggling to catch his breath, his mouth is open and a heavy exhalation escapes from his lips. His eyes are full of concentration despite his fatigue, and his face shows signs of strain and stubborn determination. A sudden flash of blinding light fills everything, making a chaos of bright lines and sparks. It is the result of a powerful magical explosion. When the powers of two mages collide, Aaron is alarmed by the situation. Our hero is in a state of extreme anger. His eyes, hidden by the shadows, are burning with determination, and his face is distorted with rage. He seems to be overwhelmed with furious feelings. He exudes a threatening glow. He decides to fully use his power to stop the mage despite any cost. The stranger, without revealing his identity, was in a state of shock. His eyes wide open, on his face, a mixture of fear and surprise. He underestimated our hero, and now the situation is out of control. A young blonde guy in a panic, his face contorted with anxiety, his mouth ajar, he screams in a trembling voice. He is clearly begging for something important. His hand is tensely stretched forward, as if he is trying to stop the inevitable. The protagonist whispers a barely audible word. His voice seems to be suffused with the tension of the moment. His eyes are full of concentration, and the dark shadows on his face reinforce the sense of anticipation of something great. His determination is so great that it seems that even the air around him is trembling. The hero, with a powerful jerk, cuts the water magic lines. His sword, with fierce force, is directed forward. Waves of magic cut the air, and the rain increases the drama of the scene. This is the climax, when he completely throws himself into the fight, leaving no chance to his opponent. He shouts to him, "Shut up, Hans." Fury and tension is felt by the protagonist. Hans grits his teeth and analyzes the situation, thinking that the opponent is an unknown and hidden force. Hans says faintly, "Brother." Now Aaron knows exactly who he is dealing with. Hans, sighing heavily, sank to the ground, a deep cut on his neck, from which a thin trickle of blood flowed. He raised his head slightly, as if trying to hold back the pain, but the sharp line of his chin, tense jaw, and blank stare gave the impression that he was ready to meet his fate, no matter how bitter it was. A young man with golden hair covered with raindrops has taken off his hood. He looks up at his interlocutor with an expression of despair and fear. His tear-filled eyes are trembling and raindrops mixed with tears are running down his cheek. He struggles to force out the words, asking if his brother can spare him, as if he is clinging to his last hope of salvation. Aaron leans forward and looks at Hans kneeling on his knees, his face tense as he speaks of the rumors that have reached him about a possible contract with the demon. His eyes a mixture of anger and pain, as if he is demanding the truth, knowing that even a simple confirmation of these rumors would change everything. The protagonist, seized by emotion, places a hand on his shoulder, pressing him against the wet wall. His words are harsh and full of anxiety, as he states that if the rumors of a deal with the demon are true, there should be a scar left near his heart, as if every word is a test of truthfulness. Our hero's face is filled with sadness. He stares into the void in front of him, and the raindrops running down his hair and cheek reflect his inner storm. His gaze is fixed on one point, as if he is trying to sort out his feelings or decide what to do next. He stands still for a moment, as if on the verge of making an important decision. And then we see Hans's bare torso, clear skin in the place where the protagonist says a scar should have been. This cannot be resisted. There is no room for mercy. You're either justified or you will be hanged in front of everyone, he continues, turning to the blond man with an icy expression on his face, his words sounding like a merciless judgment from which there is no escape. With a sudden jolt, Aaron roughly pushes Hans out of the alley. "Get out of here," he says, his orders sounding as cold and uncompromising as the winter wind. Hans, feeling despair and emptiness, obediently turns and walks away without turning around. As Hans takes a few steps away, his voice, full of pain and hope, echoes in the silence. His brother's voice falls from his lips like a final act of despair, filled with the unspoken words he has never dared to utter. His eyes glisten with tears, but a faint spark of hope still burns in them. Suddenly, Aaron, losing control of himself, turns round and strikes a powerful blow that makes Hans recoil. the sound of the blow echoing through the alley, as if breaking the last bridge between them. Aaron clenched his teeth and shouted, "Stop calling me brother! Get out of my life forever!" His voice shaking with repressed emotion, and his eyes full of pain and anger. Too much pain and disappointment he had brought. Hans staggers to his feet, his hands trembling as he tugs helplessly at his soiled robe, trying to hide his humiliation and despair. He realizes that their bond is broken and that there can be no return to the past. He looked at his brother with eyes full of longing and gratitude, as if he hoped that these words would erase past mistakes and restore their trust. "This is the only place left," a voice echoed through the stone walls. "Turn over every stone and check every nook and cranny." The words sounded like an order that did not tolerate objections, filling the hearts of the soldiers with determination to finish what they had started. Amidst the stone walls, the voice sounded quiet, but with such a distinct bitterness, as if each syllable cut to the core. "Don't call me brother anymore." The words echoed in his soul, like a final severing of the ties that had kept them together for so long. Hans disappeared without a trace, as if he had vanished into the morning mist, leaving behind only emptiness. Every corner of the fortress, every cobblestone of the pavement held the memory of his presence. But reality was merciless, and there was no trace of him left. Handsome hands, kind hands, friendly hands, those who once admired his good-naturedness and charm recalled his words. But now these words seemed only an echo, a forgotten whisper of the past, which could not be returned. The girl froze, her face pale with fear, as she saw a cloth falling smoothly over her head. Curled up like a sign of distress, time seemed to stop, and she could not look away until the black object fell at her feet. The theft of the undergarments of the noble Lady Casterdick. These words sounded like a sentence that filled the air around him. The clouds moving slowly against the rising sun seemed to laugh at the ridiculousness of the accusation. But there was only a heavy feeling in his heart. In this world plunged into medieval chaos, where purity, laws, and ethics all seemed to hang on a thin thread ready to break at any moment. People lived by harsh rules that did not always reflect true justice, and this world dictated its own laws. Aaron muttered a curse, barely able to contain his irritation, glancing up at the sky as if searching for answers. And whose underwear was it this time? The question sounded tired and hopeless, as if he knew he would find no joy in the answer.